The scorching sun was barely breaking over the horizon when Ranger Elias and his partner, a sharp-eyed wildlife biologist named Dr. Leona Masiko, rolled through the cracked earth of Mbali Valley in their dusty Land Rover. This part of northern Botswana was usually alive with bird calls and the distant roars of lions, but today, there was nothing. Just silence. And in the bush, silence meant something was very, very wrong. "We should have heard them by now," Elias muttered, checking the GPS collar tracker for a lioness they'd been monitoring for weeks. Her name was Zuri, a dominant female with 3 cubs born just over a month ago. According to the satellite data, she hadn't moved in almost 24 hours. Leona frowned, wiping the sweat from her brow. "She's always on the move. Hunting, guarding. She's never this still." They drove on in tense silence. The valley stretched out in eerie quiet, grass bending under the wind, as if mourning something unseen. Zuri had always stayed near the ridge with her cubs, but now the tracker blinked from a spot closer to the riverbed, an odd location for a lioness with young cubs. When they reached the edge of the acacia grove, Leona spotted the first sign of trouble. "Elias. Stop. Look." A single buzzard circled overhead. They stepped out, the heat already rising from the soil in visible waves. Elias shouldered his rifle, not to kill, but to protect. Poachers had been reported in the region in recent months, and lions weren't their only targets. They followed a faint trail down into a ravine, where the scent of blood hit them like a wall. There, under the broken limbs of a twisted fever tree, lay Zuri. She was alive, but barely. Her golden coat was matted with dirt and blood. Deep claw marks raked her sides, and one of her rear legs was bent at an unnatural angle. She tried to lift her head but collapsed again with a faint growl. Beside her, one cub mewled softly, its tiny face streaked with dust and fear. The other 2 cubs were gone. Leona knelt beside the lioness. "These wounds aren't from prey. This was a fight. Another lion. Possibly more than one." Elias scanned the area. "Rogues?" Leona nodded grimly. "Looks like a coalition. 2 males, maybe more. If they're trying to take over the pride, they'd kill the cubs. That's how it goes. Then where are the others?" That question hung in the hot air, unanswered. They quickly called in the mobile vet team. Elias secured the perimeter while Leona calmed the cub and examined Zuri's wounds. The lioness was dehydrated, in shock, and possibly concussed. The surviving cub clung to her side, terrified. As they prepared a stretcher, Leona's satellite phone buzzed. It was a ranger named Bogo, calling from a neighboring reserve. "We found a lion cub wandering alone near the southern border. Looks hurt. Young, real young." Leona's blood ran cold. "How far?" 30 kilometers. Maybe more." Elias looked at her, eyes narrowed. "That's not right. A cub that young couldn't travel that far on its own. Someone moved it." Leona clenched her jaw. "Poachers. They must have been nearby. The male lions could have been lured or manipulated, the chaos used as cover. Poachers often took cubs alive, sold them into illegal wildlife trade for profit. Zuri hadn't just been attacked by rival lions. She and her cubs had been caught in a trap set by humans. With Zuri stabilized and en route to the Wildlife Rescue Center, Elias and Leona drove straight south, the terrain turning dusty and sparse. They reached the southern reserve at dusk, where Bogo waited for them beside an old termite mound. "I didn't touch the cub," he said softly. "Didn't want to scare it more." The little lion lay in the shade of a bush, paw swollen, breathing fast. A crude wire snare was embedded deep around its leg. The sight made Leona's stomach turn. She moved carefully, whispering. "It's okay, little one. You're safe now." She sedated the cub and removed the snare, working quickly. Blood oozed from the wound, but the cub didn't cry. It was too weak. Then she saw it. A small, unnatural bulge behind the cub's ear. She touched it gently, and realized it was a tracking device. "This isn't ours," she said. Elias took a closer look. "It's not even regional. That's international tech." Leona's expression darkened. "Someone tagged this cub. Illegally. They were watching the pride. This wasn't random." Elias didn't say a word. But his face hardened. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was an investigation. Back at the rescue center, Zuri lay in a shaded pen, watched over by staff. She was barely conscious, but her breathing had steadied. The two cubs snuggled against her. When they brought in the third cub, the one with the snare wound, Zuri stirred. Even in her weakened state, she lifted her head and sniffed the air. Then, slowly, painfully, she extended her neck and licked the injured cub's paw. A low rumble came from her throat. Not a growl. A purr. Leona felt a lump rise in her throat. Against all odds, Zuri recognized her lost cub. It was the turning point. From that day on, Zuri improved. Her wounds healed. Her appetite returned. And the cubs, though scarred, began to play again. Their bond, nearly shattered, held firm. But the story wasn't over. The foreign tracking chip had been traced to an international wildlife trafficking syndicate. Elias and Leona turned over everything to the authorities: coordinates, photos, even samples of the snare wire. Interpol took the case. And then, weeks later, the news came. The raid was successful. A compound outside Pretoria had been busted, one disguised as a big cat sanctuary. Inside were cages, forged records, and dozens of sedated animals, including lions bred illegally for hunting. Zuri's pride had been targeted as potential breeders. Her cubs, just commodities. But they got away. 6 months later. Mbali Valley had changed. The air was filled with sound again, birds, crickets, and in the distance, a low roar. Elias and Leona stood on a rocky ledge, watching a familiar shape move across the plains below. Zuri, lean and scarred, walked with quiet authority, her cubs flanking her side. They were bigger now, confident, alert, wild. She wasn't supposed to survive, Elias said. She did more than survive, Leona replied. She exposed an entire network. Because she fought. Because she didn't give up. And because we listened, he added. They stood in silence for a moment, just watching. Then something stirred in the distance. A second lioness emerged, young, unknown. She approached Zuri cautiously. The two touched noses, then settled beside each other. A new pride forming? Elias asked. Leona smiled. Maybe. Or just the next chapter. As the sun dipped low, casting the valley in gold, a cool wind swept across the land. The silence that had once haunted Mbali Valley was gone, replaced with life and resilience. And somewhere in that chorus of distant calls and rustling leaves, was the echo of a lioness's roar. A reminder that even in the heart of violence and betrayal, life could still rise. Fierce. Proud. Unbroken. We appreciate you watching all the way through. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.